All right, match 2 on the play again. We have a very slow hand. We can go turn 2, do nothing. Turn 3, hopefully draw a land for exclude compulsive research or a black land for a kill spell. I think we're too unlikely to be hurting on black mana for too long, so I'm going to try to mulligan this. Alright, this hand is fine. Agony Warp is also fine. I'll put that on top. And hopefully we're playing against a creature-based deck, because this hand is awful against the mirror match. And it looks like it is the mirror match. There's always a small chance it's blue-black Delver, but it's probably not. That means our Agony Warp, Echoing Decay, and Evankar's Justice basically do nothing. Unfortunately. Oh, Mulldrifter. Oh, so this might actually be the Morbid Sultai deck that we saw before. Anything but the mirror match. The mirror match just takes way too much time. They're going to discard a hand size again. We're going to cycle our knowledge. They discard a swamp to hand size. So we don't have any counter magic in hand. We'll take this opportunity to play the Talisman and start gaining life. Chittering Rats. Okay, so this is some deck that is, for some reason, playing Chittering Rats and Mulldrifter in the same deck. So some sort of blue-black control variant. Or maybe a mono-black deck splashing for Mulldrifter. I also have a feeling that they have Undying Evil in their deck, since it combos very well with Evoked Mulldrifter and also someone trying to kill a Chittering Rats. Regardless, I am going to try to take this down. Alright, Deprive, that's a nice draw. So our goal of this game is to figure out exactly what our opponent is doing, so we know how to sideboard against them, since they're not playing a known deck. Lots of land and passing, so they're probably playing counter spells of their own. Chittering Rats. Alright, well I don't particularly want that to resolve. And I don't mind if our opponent counters back though. Counter spell, that's good. They discard Doomblade to hand size. They discard another Doomblade to hand size. So obviously right now, if they can't hit land drops and we keep hitting ours, then we're pretty advantaged. Grim Harvest targeting Chittering Rats. So if I don't counter the Grim Harvest here, I'm pretty much priced into countering the Chittering Rats on the way back down. Because eventually I'm going to have to kill it again, and that's going to trigger the Grim Harvest, and then they return it to their hand, and the cycle repeats indefinitely. I need to find my Crypt card so I can exile that Chittering Rats. Until then, I'm going to try to get rid of this. If they counter back, then I'm kind of in trouble. Crypt Incursion, perfect. So now the next time they try to do that, I can Crypt Incursion in response. Yet another discard to hand size. Echoing Decay that time. We draw another Evankar's Justice. Pristine Talisman is letting that be a win condition. Ooh, Mystical Teachings. Since I don't have that much to do at instant speed besides the Crypt Incursion, I'm going to do this main phase. And I think I'm going to either Counterspell, Capsize, or Accumulated Knowledge. Accumulated Knowledge lets me keep hitting land drops. Capsize lets us force our opponent to start doing something, or we get to start getting their aqueducts. I think accumulated knowledge is the right choice here, though. I really want to hit these land drops. Then I can flash back mystical and I can go grab the capsize or whatever else. So here I'm going to compulsive research. I'm actually going to tap out of Crypt Incursion for 1 turn so they can go off with their Grim Harvest if they want. I really need to find a land. Wow. Okay, so there's just no lands left in my deck apparently. So I'm at 11 cards in hand. I'm going to have to discard 4 total. I don't want to deck myself, that's for sure. So I don't want to cast both of these. I'll discard one of them and save the other, maybe. This seems bad against them. Alright, let's see what I'm discarding hand size now. I shouldn't need both of these Justices, hopefully. And Doomblade only hits Mulldrifter so far. I think this is fine. And see what our opponent can do with the turn of us being tapped out. Alright, there's a Chittering Rats. So we will start off with the Chainers. Make sure they don't try to Undying Evil in response. Grim Harvest is triggered. They get to return Grim Harvest. I get to Accumulated Knowledge. And hopefully draw land this time? Maybe? Alright, there's a land. And what am I getting rid of? Actually, I'm not going to have to get rid of anything, because our opponent is going to go for it. I get to Crypt Incursion them. I only gain 6 life, but it does mean the Grim Harvest fizzles. Unless they counter back. Oh, that was 4 cards? I totally missed that. Seagate Oracle. Not going to counter that. So now the goal is to deck our opponent or kill them with Evankar's Justice before we deck ourselves, since we're currently 3 cards ahead of them in the race through our deck. Capsize would be a great draw. Force our opponent to do something and then counter back with our counter spells and prohibit. They're going to return the Grim Harvest, then get back the Seagate Oracle if they like. They're also discarding a hand size here. A Disfigure. I'm going to go ahead and pop out both of our graveyards now so we know what's going on. I have a Chainers and a Mystical. They have a Grim Harvest that they just returned. So most likely Mystical's going to go get Capsize on their end step. I don't mind them continuing to Seagate Oracle. It's not a threat to us. And I don't mind them digging through their deck either. There's going to be a long, grinding matchup. And if we lose, we have to win 2 more matches. So I'm going to try to commentate a little bit faster. Mystical Teachings. Capsize. Land. I'll get rid of Murder, I suppose, because it's kind of expensive. 1 damage a turn is not going to be a problem since we have Pristine Talisman and 44 life. Another Seagate Oracle. Alright, with that on the stack, I'm going to start our Capsize plan. Force our opponent to show us counter magic if they have it. Alright, there's a counter spell. Prohibit that. Capsize resolves. Aqueduct is returned. Mulldrifter evoked. I'm fine with that. If they decide to Undying Evil it, I'll probably Echoing Decay it. Our opponent returns Grim Harvest to their hand. So we know they have an Aqueduct and a Grim Harvest. But they just discarded the Aqueduct. So we know they have a Grim Harvest, basically. And we get to capsize again with 2 counter spells available. We let our opponent have more mana by doing this before they after they untap rather, but I'm okay with that. They return Mulldrifter. Here's your capsize. They use up their second counter spell. And the Aqueduct is returned. Discarding Agony Warp. Fine draw. I have no problem with our opponent drawing cards, so I'm going to let the Mulldrifter resolve. I want them to stay ahead of us in the decking race. Discard 2 cards to hand size. Innocent Blood is nice and efficient, so I'll fire that off. It also gets rid of the Grim Harvest, since we took our opponent off of a land. I don't think the Grim Harvest was really doing much, but it's something. So our opponent's only doing 1 damage to us a turn net with these Pristine Talismans on the field. Mnemonic Wall, so they can get back Counterspell, I guess, would be the best thing. I think that's worth countering. We'll exclude their Mnemonic Wall. I don't want to have to deal with the Counterspell. And bounce back a land here, I suppose. I could also bounce back creatures, but it doesn't really matter. I don't mind the creatures, since they're not going to kill me fast enough. I'd rather limit our opponent on their mana. Once we're starting to be able to capsize twice a turn, then we're going to be doing very well. So we can't quite do it with Counterspell backup, but we can at least Mystical once. So we're going to go find another Counterspell maybe. Yeah, Counterspell is fine. Could also go Mind Games, but I don't think that matters. Now our opponent has to make the first move because they are going to deck themselves first. We'll let the Mystical Teachings, they only have 19 cards to look through anyway. Soul Manipulation. Counter-attack a creature spell or return a creature. Yeah. They're going to return Mnemonic Wall. That's fine. We'll wait till they tap out to cast it and then counter the Mnemonic Wall. Alright, there's the wall. Say no. Bajuka Bog hits us. So they're getting rid of our Mystical Teachings. We can fire that off right now if we like. That means we can't counterspell this or capsize this turn. I don't mind the Chainer's Edict and such going away. I don't think I need a Mystical Teachings. It doesn't matter. Radiant Fountain. So now the only thing we need to worry about is our opponent making us draw cards. We already discarded our Compulsive Research, right? Or did we use it? Yeah, I think we used it. So we unfortunately can't do the same trick targeting our opponent to try to make them draw more cards and speed up their clock. But they can do the same thing to us, so we need to watch out for that. Opponent is going to Mystical Teachings in response. Yeah, there's the Mystical Teachings. Let them go get a counterspell and then counter that. Ghostly Flicker. If they want to draw cards, that's fine by me. Oh, they can hit lands with that. That's kind of cool. So do I want to let this capsize go and let our opponent start developing their lands so that I can start Evankar's Justicing? Yeah, I think that's fine. So we don't actually need the capsize here. I'd rather just protect myself from our opponent compulsive researching us. Evankar's Justice. Get rid of the Seagate Oracles. It really doesn't matter, but just in case it does. And now we should be able to kill our opponent with Evankar's Justice before they deck us, even if they have multiple compulsive researches. I think we can overcome 2. Okay, right here I'm skipping 5 turns of us doing nothing but casting Evankar's Justice and our opponent doing nothing relevant. You're welcome. So let's look at our opponent's deck and figure out how we're going to sideboard. They are blue-black. They have probably 4 Chittering Rats, 2 Mystical Teachings, or 3 Mystical Teachings. Removal spells they're going to have to sideboard out. Ghostly Flickers. They can't go infinite with this, but I guess they can keep on flickering Chittering Rats and a Mnemonic Wall to lock someone out of the game if they have only uncastable cards left and unplayable cards. They're probably running some number of counter spells, but probably not the full 4. Alright, let's go to sideboard. Against this deck, it looks like the removal they do have doesn't even hit Gurmag Angler. Deadweight, Disfigure, and Doomblade, whatever else they had, Agony Warp. Only Soul Manipulation we saw that can deal with this. Duress is definitely good against a counterspell deck. We cut the Mind Games, the Tragic Slip, Doomblade, although it can hit Mulldrifter. Our opponent is going to have Bojuka Bog, so they're going to have ways to fight our graveyard. So these Chainer's Edicts might be worse. I'll cut a Chainer's and a Compulsive Research for Dispel and maybe Negate. And I believe I'll run it like this. Alright, we have a hand that is very slow. Not very good against Chittering Rats. Against Duress, they can take out our Capsize before we can do anything about it. But we have lands, and our opponent mulliganed, and we don't really need a lot of removal early on since our opponent's not aggressive. So I think I'm going to keep this. Opponent went to 6 and scried to the bottom. Alright. Letting them know we don't have Counterspell here by playing Fountain instead of Island. But now we can pick up the Fountain with Aqueduct. Alright, there's a rat. Cycle this. Use this opportunity to pick up the Fountain. I could also leave open Counterspell, but I'd rather wait. Evoked Mulldrifter, okay. They put a Swamp back into their hand and attack us for 2. We pass with Mystical Teachings available. So our goal is going to be capsizing their Aqueduct in 2 turns, if we can. Mulldrifter, okay. I'm fine with that. Don't mind them drawing cards, and I think I can overcome them having a somewhat fast start. So I'm just going to take the damage for a little while and grab a Dispel so that I can have as much to fight over their counter magic as possible, and things like Ghostly Flicker. Cycle this away. Echoing Decay, okay. I'll go for that now. Take out Chittering Rats. I'd rather them flicker a Mulldrifter than a rat. Gurmag Angler's fun. I'd like to wait until I can Gurmag Angler with Counterspell and Dispel back up to try to make it stick, so I'm not going to cast it yet. Alright, our opponent's going to Mystical Teachings. In response to this, we are going to bounce their Aqueduct and set them back on mana. And now if they don't have this Dispel already in hand, then we kind of get them. They get their Dispel a little bit too late. Pop this out so I don't forget about it. And they're going to have to discard hand size here unless they want to cast something. They get rid of an Aqueduct. Now let's pop out Graveyards. They have a Teachings, we have a Teachings, we have a Knowledge, and another one in our hand. I think I'm going to pass one more time. And the reason for that is none of our plays line up very well, converted mana cost wise. I can't Gurmag Angler and hold up into counter spells. I think here I'm going to Capsize with the spell back up. Alright, there's a Mulldrifter. So I think here I'm forced to try to counter the Mulldrifter, since I don't have any removal in hand and I'm at 13. Chainer's Edict is good. Now if our opponent wants to fight over it, we get to dispel their Dispel back, and then they tap out, and we get to resolve a Capsize. So I think this actually works out really well for us. We fill up our graveyard for this Angler. Yeah, this was a pretty perfect turn cycle. We can also buy back Evankar's Justice right now. We could buy back Evankar's Justice and play Angler, but it would require getting rid of the Teachings and the 2 Knowledge in our yard, which isn't very good. So I really want to use the Justice to take care of the Mulldrifter with buyback for card advantage reasons, but I also want to Capsize while our opponent is tapped out. I might be overvaluing resolving a Capsize here, though, and undervaluing card advantage. Regardless, I think this is the correct choice, so I'm going to go for it. I'm going to Chainer's Edict them, and then I'm going to Capsize them. We know for sure that our Capsize will resolve. We stop the pressure that they can put on us. So now if they want to tap out to Mystical Teachings, they can do that. Then we get to Capsize them again, and so on. I'm not going to resolve Gurmag just yet. I'm going to Mystical for some more counter magic first, most likely. Alright, so let's take this opportunity. Bounce a land. Keep our opponent with as little to do as possible. They go get another Mystical Teachings to continue the cycle. Discard hand size. Whale of the Nim? I'm not sure what they expected us to bring this in against. Pass the turn. Mystical can resolve. I still don't want to Angler until I have counter magic back up. They go get a counter spell. We're going to make them counter our flashback Teachings on their turn instead of ours, if they want to. I'm not going to expose my Capsize to a counter spell right now. Alright. I think we need the card advantage of accumulated knowledge. So I'm going to try to resolve that. I think this will make our opponent really want to counter it. Alright, they didn't. And we get a Duress, which is pretty awesome. Get to see how much removal they kept in their deck against our Gurmag Angler. 2 Edicts, a Repeal, a Negate, and a Counterspell. So I think the only thing that makes sense to take would be Counterspell. Alright, so take care of the Counterspell. Pass the turn yet again. They get to flashback their Teachings. Probably go get another Counterspell. Oh, another mystical teachings? Just to continue the chain? Okay. I'm going to do this while they're tapped out. Our opponent is currently going to draw through their deck faster than we are. Getting another counterspell. So our opponent has definitely got their shields up. And now they get to duress us. And there's nothing we can do about it. And I think they have to take the capsize, so... We'll capsize once in response. We could capsize again to force them to take something else and get another land bounce. I don't think that much matters, though. And the exclude could be important. Alright, they take the capsize. At this point, I'm pretty sure I'm losing this game. I think we're behind, even though our opponent is going to draw out faster. So I'm going to play a lot faster to conserve time for game 3, since we have 5 minutes on the clock. Flashback teachings. Soul manipulation. So they can go back, get back at Chittering Rats or a Mulldrifter if they want to. Quambage Witches. Alright. Can we take that down? It doesn't die to an Evankar's Justice, so... And they will kill us first. Pristine Talisman is a great draw. Soul Manipulation for Chittering Rats. Make them use a counterspell to counter back here if they wanted to resolve. Another Quambage Witches. Okay. So we know our opponent still has 2 edicts in hand. I think this is the point that I want to try to resolve my Gurmag Angler. Our opponent can't repeal or negate it. And they do not counterspell it either. Alright, edict number 1. Fight that. Make our opponent use up all their counter magic to get this off the table. Another edict, counterspell that. And let's see if they use up their last counterspell. No, another negate. So at this point they have a repeal and a counterspell in hand. Okay, we're going to skip some time again. Last time it was only 5 turns, this time it is 19 turns. I'm going to give you a summary, okay? Our opponent had no way to win the game with damage. Our opponent was unable to prevent themselves from decking. And they had no tools, such as a compulsive research or 2, to try to make us deck ourselves first. I believe the only reason my opponent did not concede was because they were trying to time us out. And they actually came pretty close. Luckily for us, they did not succeed, however, and they decked themselves out 15 minutes and 19 turns later. If you're the type of viewer who is shouting right now, "Oh no, I wanted to see those 19 turns of no one doing anything relevant," then you might just have the tenacity and the ruthlessness needed to play Dimir teachings, because some of these control-on-control matchups can be long and very pointless. If you're like me, however, and you don't want to watch 19 turns of nothing relevant to the game state happening, then you may want to stray away from selecting Dimir teachings as your deck of choice. Alright, back to the video. So we won. And we are on to the next match. And we only have 23 seconds left on our clock, so need to be more careful, obviously.